The year was 1868, when the Wyoming Territory stood as a testament to both America's promise and its unforgiving nature. In the shadow of Thunder Ridge, where pristine waters carved valleys deep into ancient stone, courage wasn't measured in grand declarations but in quiet persistence, and kindness remained as rare as gold dust in a prospector's pan. This is the remarkable tale of Hannah Miller, a woman who lost her sight but discovered her true strength, and Swift River, an Arapaho navigator who saw beyond the boundaries that divided their worlds. The western frontier demanded everything, from those who dared to claim it, blood and bone, hope and heartbreak. For some, like Hannah, it demanded even more, the courage to face a wilderness she would never see, guided by senses those around her often failed to understand. Her journey would become a testament to human resilience and the unexpected bonds formed when two people from different worlds find themselves united against nature's most formidable forces. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The spring of 1868 arrived with deceptive gentleness to the Wyoming Territory. After months of bitter cold, the tentative warmth felt like a blessing as it caressed the land. Wildflowers dotted the plains with splashes of color, and birdsong filled the air with dawn promises. But old-timers knew better than to trust spring's sweet whispers. They understood that beneath the beauty lurked danger. Snowmelt from Thunder Ridge, feeding hungry rivers that devoured shorelines and the dreams built upon them. Hannah Miller sat perched on her wagon's edge, her fingers trailing along the rough, wooden planks beneath her. Though her eyes remained open, pale blue irises that once matched the Wyoming sky, they registered nothing but the faintest distinction between light and shadow, the lingering remnant of vision that scarlet fever had left her with 5 years prior. At 32, Hannah had learned to navigate her darkness with quiet dignity, her other senses constructing a world most around her couldn't begin to comprehend. Clearfield Junction's 3 days ahead, if the weather holds. Frederick Donovan called out, his voice carrying the confident authority that had led 28 wagons safely from Pennsylvania thus far. "We'll make camp near Blackwater Crossing tonight." Hannah felt for her water canteen, bringing it to her lips. The water tasted of the tin container and the journey, metallic and dusty, but it soothed her parched throat. The expedition had proven more difficult than anyone anticipated, supplies running thin and tempers growing shorter with each passing mile. She remained acutely aware of the whispers that followed her, the blind woman, the burden, the sister who had demanded too much. Her brother-in-law, Ezekiel Wright, made little effort to hide his resentment at being saddled with her care after Hannah's parents passed during a harsh briarwood winter. The Wrights had only taken her in for the modest inheritance and weaving. Loom she'd brought with her, possessions they'd promptly sold before joining the westward expansion. Now that her usefulness had ended, their patience wore dangerously thin. "Hannah!" Her sister Abigail's voice cut through her thoughts, tight with barely concealed frustration. "The washing bucket is nearly empty again. Did you use more than your share?" "No, Abigail," Hannah replied evenly, maintaining her composure despite the familiar sting of accusation. "Just the morning portion for washing. Well, someone has been wasteful, and we've miles to go before the next stream." Abigail's skirts rustled as she moved away, leaving the scent of lavender water and bitter disappointment in her wake. The wagon lurched forward over a rut, and Hannah steadied herself against the jolt. Her fingers found the small bundle tucked beside her, all she had left in the world. A change of clothes, a bone comb that had belonged to her mother, a small book of psalms with raised letters she could trace in quiet moments when sleep eluded her. And most precious of all, a silver pendant containing a miniature portrait of her parents, its weight a comforting reminder of happier times. By mid-afternoon, the air changed perceptibly. Hannah could smell it, that distinctive earthy scent that preceded rain, metallic and charged with possibility. The caravan's pace quickened as the first heavy raindrops began to fall, striking Hannah's face like cool fingertips. "Weather's turning," Donovan shouted from the lead wagon. "Might be worse than expected. Blackwater could be running high." The gentle patter quickly transformed into a torrent, rain hammering against the canvas covering as the wagons groaned to a halt. Chaos erupted around Hannah. Men shouting orders, women gathering children, the frightened whinnying of horses. Sensing danger, she remained where she was, knowing she would only hinder the preparations if she tried to help. "Secure those wagon covers!" Donovan bellowed over the intensifying downpour. "Tie down anything that might wash away." Lightning split the sky, illuminating Hannah's world in a flash of white that even her damaged eyes could perceive. Thunder followed immediately, shaking the ground beneath the wagon wheels. The storm had arrived with unexpected ferocity. The old-timers whispered about around campfires, the kind that reshaped landscapes and fortunes in a single night. "The river's rising," someone shouted in alarm. "Water's already at the lower bank." Hannah felt the first trickle of cold water seeping through the floorboards, soaking the hem of her woolen dress. Panic fluttered in her chest as she reached for her bundle, clutching it protectively. "Abigail! Ezekiel!" she called out, her voice nearly lost in the storm's fury. Only the roar of rain and rushing water answered her. The water rose with frightening speed, now sloshing against the wagon bed. Hannah moved toward the front, feeling her way carefully along the drenched wood. "Is anyone there?" she called again, louder this time. A hand grasped her arm roughly, pulling her forward. "Move!" Ezekiel's voice came sharp with fear. "The wagons are flooding. Everyone's heading for higher ground." He half-dragged her through the mud, her boots slipping on the slick ground. The rain formed a solid wall of water, disorienting even those who could see. Hannah stumbled, fell to her knees, felt the cold mud soak through her skirts. "Get up!" Ezekiel yanked her to her feet. "I swear, Hannah, you're more trouble than—" His words cut off as another crack of thunder split the air. They struggled upward, the incline growing steeper. Hannah's lungs burned with effort, her free hand clutching her precious bundle while Ezekiel pulled her forward by the other arm. The sounds of the caravan, shouting voices, crying children, frightened animals, grew fainter. Whether lost in the storm's fury or distance, she couldn't tell. "Wait here," Ezekiel ordered suddenly, pressing her against what felt like a rough rock face. "I need to help Donovan with the horses. Don't move an inch." His presence vanished before she could respond. Hannah stood perfectly still, rain cascading. Down her face, her back pressed against the stone's solidity. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The storm's intensity began to wane, the thunder now a distant rumble rather than an earth-shaking roar. "Ezekiel," she called hesitantly, then louder. "Abigail, anyone from the caravan." Only the diminishing patter of rain and the distant rush of water answered her. Dread pooled in her stomach. Colder than the rain that had soaked her to the skin, she had been abandoned. Hannah slid down the rock face until she sat on the sodden ground, her bundle clutched to her chest. The enormity of her situation crashed over her like the floodwaters below. Blind, alone in a wilderness she could not navigate, with no shelter, little food, and no means to make fire. If the elements didn't claim her, predators surely would. As night fell, not that it made much difference to her world of shadows, the temperature dropped sharply. Hannah's wet clothes clung to her skin, drawing heat from her body. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably. She thought of moving, trying to find the caravan, but in her blindness, each step risked a deadly fall down, the unfamiliar slope or into a ravine she couldn't see. "So this is how it ends," she whispered to herself, a strange calm settling over her despite the circumstances. There was almost relief in the finality of it. No more pitying glances she couldn't see but could feel. No more being the burden, the afterthought, the problem to be solved. The night deepened around her, insects resuming their chorus after the storm. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its mournful howl echoing across the valley. Hannah leaned her head back against the rock, exhaustion pulling at her. She should try to stay awake, she knew, but the cold made her limbs heavy, her thoughts sluggish. Just as her consciousness began to slip away, another sound cut through the night. Deliberate footsteps approaching through the underbrush. Not the heavy tread of Ezekiel or any of the caravan men, these steps were lighter, more measured, as if the walker knew exactly how to place each foot for maximum silence. Hannah froze, hardly daring to breathe. Bear, wolf, or something worse, someone. Who might wish her harm? She had heard stories of renegades who preyed on vulnerable travelers, tales whispered around campfires she was never meant to hear. The footsteps paused. She could feel a presence nearby, watching her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain it could be heard. Then a voice spoke, deep and clear, with an accent she had never encountered. "You are far from your people, blind one." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. She turned her face toward the voice, her useless eyes wide with fear and desperate hope. "They left me," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "The storm came and they left me." A moment of silence followed, heavy with judgment, not for her, but for those who had abandoned her. Then the stranger spoke again. "Night grows cold. The waters rise further below. You will die here alone." It wasn't a threat, merely a statement of fact, delivered with the same dispassionate certainty as one might remark on approaching rain or a setting sun. "I know," Hannah replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Another silence, then the rustle of movement as the stranger crouched beside her. She could sense his proximity, smell leather and wood smoke and something herbal on his clothes. "I am called Swift River by my people. Some traders know me as Daniel." The voice held neither pity nor promise. "What are you called, blind woman of the settlers?" "Hannah Miller," she answered, turning her face toward the sound of his voice. "And I don't want to die in these mountains." "Can you stand?" Swift River asked, his voice betraying no emotion. Hannah nodded, struggling to her feet with limbs stiffened by cold and fear. Her fingers clutched her small bundle of possessions as if it were a lifeline to the world she had lost. The creation of this story required extensive research into Arapaho culture and the Wyoming Territory's history. If you're enjoying it, please take a second to subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue creating content like this. Now let's return to Hannah and Swift River. "The storm has passed, but the waters have not," Swift River continued. "Your people have gone north along the ridge, too far now to reach before dawn." Hannah swallowed hard, forcing back the wave of despair that threatened to engulf her. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her abandonment real. "They didn't look for me," she said, the words somewhere between a question and a statement. "One man called your name 3 times, Swift River replied evenly. Then a woman cried. Then they continued on. Ezekiel and Abigail, fulfilling only the barest obligation of conscience before leaving her to die. Hannah's jaw tightened. They never intended to find me. Swift River made a sound that might have been agreement. Night grows colder. We cannot stay here. We? Hannah turned her face toward his voice, surprise evident in her sightless eyes. Unless you prefer to remain, he answered, a hint of dry humor in his otherwise serious tone. A humorless laugh escaped her. I prefer to live. Then we go. My shelter is not far, but the path is difficult. Can you follow? Hannah hesitated. Everything she had been taught warned against trusting a stranger, especially one from a tribe settlers often regarded with suspicion. But what choice did she have? "I can follow your voice," she said finally, "but I cannot see where to place my feet." Swift River was silent for a moment, considering. "Give me your hand," he said at last. Hannah reached out tentatively, her hand wavering in the space between them. Warm, calloused fingers wrapped around her wrist, not roughly as Ezekiel had done, but with firm, steady pressure. "I will guide you. Tell me when you tire or when the path becomes too difficult." They set off through the darkness, moving at a deliberate pace. Swift River walked slightly ahead of her, his grip on her wrist maintaining just enough tension to communicate direction and obstacles. When a fallen log blocked their path, he guided her hand to feel its height. When the ground dipped suddenly, his grip tightened in warning. "The flood has changed the land," he explained, helping her navigate a section where mud slid treacherously beneath their feet. "Water carves new paths through earth. What was safe yesterday may not be safe today." Hannah stumbled once, her breath catching as her foot slipped on wet leaves. Swift River steadied her instantly, his other hand catching her elbow. "Thank you," she murmured, embarrassed by her helplessness, yet grateful for his patience. They continued in silence for a time, the forest alive with night sounds around them, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, the steady drip of rainwater from laden branches. "How did you lose your sight?" Swift River asked suddenly, his voice breaking the rhythm of their journey. Hannah's lips pressed together, the memory still painful despite the passage of time. "Fever. 5 summers passed. It took my parents in Briarwood and left me in darkness." She didn't add how quickly childhood friends had fallen away, how potential suitors had vanished, how her life had narrowed to dependence on reluctant relatives. "The sickness that burns the eyes." Swift River nodded, though she couldn't see it. "We have known this in our villages too." His words held no pity, which Hannah found strangely comforting. Pity was a burden heavier than blindness itself. The terrain changed beneath her feet, from the soft give of forest floor to a harder, rockier surface. The air shifted too, cooler, with the scent of water nearby. "We follow the stream now," Swift River explained. "It leads to where I have made camp. The flooding has not reached this height." "You don't live with your people?" Hannah asked, curiosity momentarily distracting her from discomfort. A lengthy pause followed. "I travel between worlds," he finally said. "Guide for the Arapaho, interpreter for white settlers when they pay well, trusted by both, belonging to neither." The complexity in those simple words struck Hannah deeply. Here was someone who understood isolation, though of a different kind than hers. "Your English is very good," she observed. "Mission school until I was 14, he replied. "Then 3 years with a fur trader from St. Louis who needed someone who spoke Arapaho and Cheyenne. And now you're helping a blind woman through a flooded wilderness," Hannah said, unable to keep a hint of bitter humor from her voice. "Surely not what you planned for this night." "Plans are for those who believe they control the path ahead," Swift River said, something like amusement warming his voice. "I have learned to follow the trail that opens before me." They walked in silence again, Hannah concentrating on keeping her footing on the increasingly rocky ground beside the stream. The rush of water grew louder, surrounding them. "We cross here," Swift River announced, stopping suddenly. "The water is not deep, but the stones are slippery. I will carry you." Before Hannah could protest, he had taken her bundle and secured it somewhere on his person. Then strong arms lifted her effortlessly, one behind her back, the other beneath her knees. She instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, startled by the sudden proximity. Swift River stepped into the stream, his movements careful but confident as he navigated the crossing. Hannah could feel the tensing of his muscles as he balanced on submerged stones, the slight adjustments he made when one shifted beneath his weight. The water gurgled around them, its cold spray occasionally touching her face. "I hear it too," she whispered to Swift River after one such occurrence. "Something is following us." Swift River squeezed her arm briefly in acknowledgement. "Stay close." The pace quickened, the group moving with greater purpose. Hannah struggled to keep up, her blindness more limiting at this accelerated speed. Twice she stumbled on hidden roots or stones, saved from falling only by Swift River's quick reflexes. Suddenly, White Bear hissed a warning. The group froze. Hannah held her breath, straining to hear what had alarmed their guide. A low growl emerged from the underbrush ahead, not the mountain lion's rumble, but something equally primal and threatening. Then another answered from behind them. "Wolves," Morningstar whispered. "A pack." Fear tightened around Hannah's chest. One predator had been terrifying enough. A pack spelled certain death if they attacked. "Circle," Swift River ordered quietly, Hannah in the center. The group rearranged swiftly, forming a protective ring around her. Hannah clutched her walking stick, knowing it would provide little defense, but unwilling to stand entirely helpless. "They do not usually hunt humans," White Bear observed, his voice betraying confusion. "Something drives them to desperation." "Or someone," Running Elk added grimly. Another growl, closer now. Hannah could hear the soft padding of paws circling their position, the occasional snap of jaws. Swift River spoke quietly in Arapaho, a prayer or perhaps a chant, the words flowing with rhythmic intensity. To Hannah's surprise, Morningstar joined him, their voices twining together in ancient syllables that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The wolves' movements changed, still circling but more hesitant, less coordinated. A high-pitched whine rose from one, answered by confused growls from the others. "They are uncertain now," Morningstar murmured to Hannah. "The old words remind them of the time when wolf and human spoke the same language." Hannah wasn't sure whether to believe such things were possible, but the effect was undeniable. The wolves' aggressive stance was wavering. White Bear seized the moment, striking flint to steel and creating a sudden shower of sparks that ignited a handful of dried pine needles he had prepared. The small flame cast dancing shadows through the trees. "Fire!" he announced, feeding the flame until it grew stronger. "Now we make our stand." The wolves retreated further from the firelight, their growls diminishing. Hannah felt the tension in their circle ease slightly, though no one relaxed their vigilance. "We cannot stay here," Running Elk pointed out. "Night comes, and the village is still far." "We make torches," Swift River decided. "Continue with fire." Working quickly, the group fashioned crude torches from pine branches, wrapping them with resin-soaked bark that caught the flames eagerly. Hannah was given a smaller branch, its end glowing hot, not to carry, but to hold ready if needed. They set off again, movement slower but steadier. The wolves kept pace at a distance, no longer closing in. Hannah could hear them tracking parallel to their path, occasionally growling or whining to each other. "They are being driven." Morningstar said quietly, walking close beside Hannah now. "Something compels them against their nature." What could make wolves behave this way? Hannah asked, clutching her firebrand tightly. The old woman was silent for several steps before answering. "There are those among both your people and mine who know the old ways of controlling animals. Dark medicine." The implication chilled Hannah more than the approaching evening air. "Someone is deliberately targeting us. Perhaps," Morningstar allowed, "or perhaps it is as White Bear says, hunger drives them to unusual behavior." But her tone suggested she believed the former explanation, not the latter. As darkness began to fall in earnest, their torches became their primary defense and guidance. Hannah walked carefully, hyper-aware of every sound around them, the wolves' presence a constant reminder of hovering danger. "Listen, Swift River," said suddenly, his voice lifting with cautious hope. Hannah strained her ears and caught it, a faint but steady rhythm carried on the evening breeze. "Drums," White Bear confirmed. "The village welcomes the night. We are closer than I thought." The wolves seemed to hear it too. Their tracking sounds receded gradually until Running Elk confirmed they had departed altogether. Relief washed through the group, though no one lowered their guard completely. They pressed forward with renewed energy, the distant drums growing, steadily louder, guiding them home. For Hannah, those drum beats represented an unknown future, an Arapaho village where she would be an outsider, a curiosity, perhaps even a threat. Yet after facing wolves and wilderness, after being abandoned by her own people, the prospect of reaching human settlement, any settlement, filled her with determined hope. The real test of survival, she was beginning to understand, would not be in the forest, but in what awaited her beyond it. The drums grew louder as they approached, accompanied now by the sound of voices, the bark of dogs, and the subtle but unmistakable energy of a community preparing for evening. Hannah felt the path change beneath her feet, from forest floor to a more traveled trail, packed firm by countless footsteps. "Many will stare," Swift River warned her quietly. "Few have seen white woman who walks in darkness." "I'm accustomed to stares I cannot see," Hannah replied, straightening her shoulders, "though I admit being curious among the Arapaho was not something I ever imagined." "Be respectful, but not fearful," Morningstar advised from her other side. "Our people value strength in adversity." The sounds of the village suddenly enveloped them as they crossed some invisible boundary. The drumming paused briefly, then resumed at a different tempo. Voices hushed momentarily before erupting in questions, children calling out excitedly, adults speaking in rapid Arapaho that Hannah couldn't hope to follow. Swift River kept a steadying hand at her elbow as they moved deeper into the village. The rich tapestry of senses overwhelmed Hannah. Wood smoke, cooking meat, unfamiliar herbs, tanned hides, and the distinctive smell of many humans living in close proximity. "The council lodge lies ahead," Swift River murmured. "The elders will wish to speak with us immediately." Hannah nodded, her throat too dry for words. The weight of dozens of unseen eyes pressed against her, judging, assessing, wondering. A new voice, elderly, male, carrying natural authority, spoke in Arapaho. Swift River answered respectfully, his hand tightening slightly on Hannah's arm. "Chief Many Horses wishes to know why we bring a blind settler woman to our village during troubled times," Swift River translated, keeping his voice low. Before Hannah could respond, Morningstar stepped forward, speaking at length in Arapaho. Though Hannah couldn't understand the words, she recognized the medicine woman was advocating for her, the tone both respectful and insistent. "Come," Swift River said when Morningstar finished. "We go to the council now." They were led to a large circular structure. Hannah could tell by the way sounds echoed within it and the distinctive smell of old smoke preserved in wooden beams. She was guided to sit on what felt like a woven mat, Swift River taking position beside her. What followed was unlike anything in Hannah's experience. The formal council unfolded primarily in Arapaho, with Swift River occasionally translating key points in whispered English. Chief Many Horses spoke first, his deep voice resonating with measured dignity. Then White Bear recounted their journey, the wolf encounter drawing murmurs of concern from the gathered elders. When Running Elk mentioned the soldiers at Fort Sullivan, searching for missing settlers, the council's atmosphere tensed notably. Finally, Swift River was called to speak. He explained how he had found Hannah abandoned during the flood, his decision to help her, and the skills she had shown in adapting to forest life. His tone remained factual, neither defending nor apologizing for his actions. A period of questions followed, some directed at Swift River, others at Morning Star. Hannah sat quietly, understanding that to interrupt would be seen as disrespectful. Yet as the discussion continued entirely in Arapaho, her patience began to fray. "Swift River," she whispered finally. "They are deciding my fate. Should I not speak for myself?" A ripple of reaction told her the council had heard and understood her English words. "We have crossed," he informed her, as he set her gently on her feet on the opposite bank. "The shelter is close now." "Thank you," Hannah said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks despite the cool night air. It had been years since anyone had carried her, treated her with such considerate strength. They continued on, the path beginning to slope upward. The forest sounds changed subtly, fewer insects, more wind through branches. Hannah sensed they were climbing toward more exposed terrain. "The shelter is ahead," Swift River said after they had climbed in silence for several minutes. A trapper's cabin, abandoned many seasons, small but dry. "How did you find me?" Hannah asked, the question that had been nagging at her finally breaking free. "Of all the places in these mountains, how did you come to be where I was left?" Swift River was quiet for several paces before answering. "I have watched your wagon. Trained since yesterday, I observe all who pass through Arapaho hunting grounds. Were you planning to approach the caravan?" "No," he said simply. "Too many, too armed, too fearful. But when the storm came, I saw them scatter, then regroup, then leave, but one was missing." Hannah absorbed this. "You counted." Always, the single word carried the weight of hard-learned survival wisdom. They reached the cabin minutes later, Swift River guiding her to the entrance. "Wait here," he instructed, releasing her wrist. She heard him move ahead, the shuffle of what might have been dried grass or leaves, the strike of flint, and then the unmistakable crackling of kindling catching fire. The sudden warmth against her face was like a blessing. "Come," Swift River said. "Sit by the fire." He guided her to a spot where the heat was strongest, helping her settle on what felt like a mat of woven grasses. The fragrance of sage and pine filled the small space. "Your clothes are wet. They must dry or you will sicken," Swift River said matter-of-factly. "I will turn away. There is a blanket of rabbit fur beside you." Hannah's hand found the soft pelt he described. "Thank you," she managed, the propriety of her upbringing warring with practical necessity. She heard him move to the cabin entrance, felt the slight shift in the air as he turned his back to her. With cold, clumsy fingers, she began to unlace her sodden dress, pride giving way to the desperate need for warmth and survival. As she wrapped the fur around her shoulders, feeling its surprising softness against her skin, Hannah realized she had passed into a world where the rules and judgments of her former life no longer applied. Here, in this cabin with this stranger, who had saved her without obligation, she existed in a space between her past and whatever uncertain future awaited her. And somehow, despite everything, she found herself drawing her first free breath in years. Dawn arrived, with a thin veil of mist clinging to the forest floor. Hannah woke to the sounds of quiet preparation, the soft murmur of voices speaking Arapaho, the rustle of belongings being gathered, the distinctive scrape of Swift River's knife against stone as he sharpened it one final time. "We leave soon," he told her, placing a small bundle beside her sleeping mat. "These are for you, moccasins, better for the journey than your boots." Hannah ran her fingers over the supple deerskin, feeling the careful stitching and delicate beadwork along. "The edges, they're beautiful," she said, genuinely touched by the unexpected gift. "Did you make these?" "Morning Star," Swift River replied. "She worked through the night. She says your feet have learned enough of the land to deserve proper covering." The medicine woman's gesture moved Hannah deeply. Despite whatever misgivings the Arapaho might harbor about her presence, this small kindness offered a glimmer of potential acceptance. Breakfast was hurried, dried meat, and a warm tea that tasted of mint and something earthier Hannah couldn't identify. As they prepared to depart, Swift River guided her through a final inspection of the cabin. "We may not return," he explained, helping her gather the few possessions she had accumulated. "Take what you can carry easily." The realization that she might never come back to this place struck Hannah with surprising force. The cabin had become her first true sanctuary since losing her sight, a place where she'd begun to reclaim her independence, to redefine her capabilities beyond the limiting expectations of others. "I'm ready," she said finally, slinging a small leather pouch containing her book of Psalms, the mountain lion pelt Swift River had given her, and a few other essential items across her body. The journey began with little ceremony. Hannah walked between Swift River and Morning Star, with White Bear leading and Running Elk following behind. The pace was steady but not hurried, accommodating her need to navigate carefully with her walking stick. "How far is the village?" Hannah asked as they descended the familiar path toward the stream. "Half-day's walk for those with sight," Morning Star answered. "Perhaps longer at our pace." There was no criticism in the observation, merely practicality. Hannah appreciated the honesty. "I'll try not to slow you unnecessarily," she promised. "Time moves as it should," the older woman replied cryptically. "Some journeys cannot be rushed." As they crossed the stream, Swift River guiding Hannah across stepping stones with patient hands, Running Elk spoke for the first time that morning. "The soldiers will have scouts watching the main trails," he warned. "We should take the ridge path." A brief discussion in Arapaho followed, with Swift River seemingly disagreeing. Hannah caught the repeated word "wathohe," unfamiliar, but spoken with emphasis. "The ridge path is steeper, more difficult," Swift River explained to Hannah when they switched back to English, "but perhaps safer from unwanted eyes." "I can manage steeper terrain," Hannah assured them, determined not to be the weak link in their group. "I've been practicing on the slopes near the cabin." White Bear made a sound that might have been approval. "The blind woman has courage. Let us hope she also has endurance." The path indeed proved challenging, a narrow track that wound upward through increasingly rocky terrain. Hannah's world narrowed to the careful placement of each foot, the constant vigilance required to detect changes in the ground beneath her walking stick, the steady rhythm of her breathing as they climbed higher. Swift River remained close, occasionally murmuring quiet warnings or guidance, but largely allowing her to navigate independently. Hannah sensed this was as much for the benefit of the other Arapaho as for her own pride, a demonstration that she wasn't entirely helpless. By midday, the exertion had taken its toll. When they paused to rest in a small clearing, Hannah sank gratefully onto a fallen log, her legs trembling with fatigue. The new moccasins had proven remarkably comfortable, but even they couldn't entirely mitigate the difficulty of the journey. "Drink," Swift River instructed, pressing a water skin into her hands. Slowly. As Hannah sipped the cool water, she became aware of a subtle tension in the group. The others had gathered a short distance away, their voices low but intense, as they conversed in Arapaho. "What's wrong?" she asked Swift River when he returned to her side. He hesitated before answering. "Running Elk believes we are being followed." Alarm shot through Hannah. "The soldiers." "No!" Swift River's voice dropped further. "Something else. Tracks not made by white men's boots or Arapaho moccasins." "What then?" "He is not certain, but he is rarely mistaken about such things." The rest was cut short, the group pressing onward with new urgency. The path began to descend, winding through stands of pine that filled the air with resinous fragrance. Despite the cooler temperatures at the higher elevation, Hannah found herself sweating from exertion and anxiety. As the afternoon wore on, she became increasingly aware of sounds around them, not just the natural forest noises she had learned to interpret, but something more deliberate. Occasionally, a branch would snap at a distance, or stones would clatter down a slope behind them. Swift River hesitated, clearly caught between protocols. To Hannah's surprise, it was Chief Many Horses who responded, speaking in clear, if accented English. "The blind one wishes to speak. We will hear her words." Hannah turned her face toward his voice, gathering her thoughts carefully. "Honorable Chief and Council, I come before you not by choice, but by circumstance. My own people abandoned me to die. Swift River showed me kindness when my blood kin did not." She paused, then continued with growing confidence. "I have learned much from him. How to hear the forest speak, how to find my way without eyes, how to value what truly matters. I understand my presence brings complications. If you wish me to leave, I will do so, though I ask for guidance to reach safe haven." She squared her shoulders. "But know this, I have no desire to return to those who left me to die, nor to bring soldiers to your doors. I seek only to find a place where I might live with dignity despite my blindness." A long silence followed her words. Then Chief Many Horses spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "You speak with an honest heart, Blind One, but these are dangerous times between our peoples. Treaties made are treaties broken. Arapaho land shrinks with each season. Your presence here may bring unwanted attention." "I understand," Hannah acknowledged. "What would you have me do?" Another voice joined the conversation, female, elderly, speaking first in Arapaho, then switching to English. "I am Talking Rain. I have lived 87 winters. I have seen white men come, seen, promises made and broken." Her voice carried the weight of decades of observation. "This woman is not responsible for the crimes of her people," Talking Rain continued, "and she has been touched by the Great Spirit's hand. Those who walk in darkness often carry a special sight." The elder's support surprised Hannah. She bowed, her head respectfully, uncertain how to respond. Chief Many Horses seemed to consider Talking Rain's words carefully. "She may remain for 7 days, he finally decided, under Swift River's responsibility. Then we will decide her future." Swift River thanked the chief formally. The council continued briefly, addressing other tribal matters before adjourning. As the members dispersed, Hannah remained seated, processing the temporary reprieve she'd been granted. 7 days is not long," she murmured to Swift River. "Time enough for the truth to emerge," he replied cryptically. "Come. Morning Star has arranged shelter for you in her dwelling." They exited the council lodge into the cool evening air, now filled with the sounds and scents of the village's evening meal preparations. Children's voices called out questions as they passed, quickly hushed by adults. Hannah felt herself the center of attention, despite her inability to see the curious eyes following her progress. Morning Star's dwelling proved to be a well-constructed home, larger than Hannah had expected, with a central fire pit providing warmth and light. The medicine woman guided Hannah's hands to explore the space, helping her create a mental map of her temporary sanctuary. "Here you will sleep," Morningstar explained, showing her a sleeping platform covered with soft furs. "And here your belongings may rest." She indicated a small storage shelf near the bed. "Your kindness overwhelms me," Hannah said sincerely. "Why do you welcome me when others are suspicious?" Morningstar was silent for a moment, arranging items around the fire. "I have seen visions of your coming," she said finally. 3 moons ago, when spring first touched the earth, the spirits showed me a woman walking between worlds, eyes clouded but spirit clear." Hannah's breath caught. "You foresaw me?" "Perhaps," Morningstar allowed. "Or perhaps one like you, the spirits seldom speak plainly. She placed a wooden bowl of fragrant stew in Hannah's hands. Eat now. Tomorrow brings new challenges. As Hannah ate the unfamiliar but delicious meal, she heard Swift River speaking with Morning Star in low tones by the dwelling's entrance. Though they conversed in Arapaho, the tension in their voices transcended language barriers. "Is something wrong?" she asked when Swift River approached to bid her good night. "Nothing you need concern yourself with tonight," he replied, his usual straightforwardness softened but still present. "I will return at dawn. Morning Star will remain nearby." "Where will you sleep?" Hannah asked, suddenly anxious at the prospect of navigating this new environment without him. "I have my own dwelling," Swift River explained. "Not far. 3 dwellings toward the rising sun." The information was provided in his typical way. Practical direction she could use rather than vague reassurance. Hannah appreciated it more than she could express. After Swift River departed, Morning Star helped Hannah prepare for sleep, showing her where water was kept for washing and guiding her through the unfamiliar nighttime rituals of Arapaho life. The medicine woman spoke little, but her movements communicated efficiency and unexpected gentleness. As Hannah settled onto the sleeping platform, wrapped in soft furs against the spring chill, she found herself overwhelmed by the day's events. From the cabin that had become her sanctuary to this village full of strangers, some hostile, some curious, some inexplicably welcoming, her world had expanded and contracted simultaneously. Here she was safe from wolves and weather, yet vulnerable. In new ways, the 7-day reprieve felt both generous and painfully brief. What would happen when that time expired? Would the council send her away? And if so, where? As sleep finally claimed her, Hannah's last conscious thought was of Swift River, his steady presence, his unfailing honesty, and the space between. Their worlds that seemed both unbridgeable and somehow already crossed. Morning arrived with subtle shifts in the air, the chirping of birds, replacing night creatures, the cabin warming as sunlight reached its entrance. Hannah woke disoriented, her hands instinctively seeking familiar surroundings and finding only the strange texture of rabbit fur and a rough wooden floor. Memory flooded back, the storm, the abandonment, Swift River. She sat up quickly, clutching the fur around her shoulders. "Your clothes are dry." Swift River's voice came from the cabin entrance, respectfully distant. "I have placed them beside you. There is water in a wooden cup to your right." Hannah's fingers found the rough-hewn cup, bringing it gratefully to her lips. The water was cool and sweet, washing away the sour taste of sleep and fear. "Thank you," she said, setting down the empty cup. Could you step outside while I dress?" "I am already outside," came the reply, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Call when you're ready." Left alone, Hannah felt for her clothes, finding them neatly folded beside her sleeping place. The fabric was still slightly damp in the deepest of folds, but worlds better than the soaking garments she had removed the night before. Her fingers traced a tear in the sleeve she hadn't noticed previously, likely caught on a branch during their hasty journey through the forest. As she dressed, her mind churned with uncertainties. What would happen now? The caravan was gone, continuing northward without her. Even if Swift River helped her reach Clearfield Junction, what awaited her there? No family, no funds, no prospects, just the same pity and burden she had endured with the rites. "I am dressed," she called when she had finished smoothing her skirts with hands that trembled slightly from more than just the morning chill. Swift River's footsteps entered the cabin, accompanied by a new scent, something earthy and rich. "Food," he explained, sensing her alertness. "Pine nuts and dried venison." He placed something in her hands, a flat piece of bark that served as a plate. Hannah felt its contents carefully, strips of dried meat and what felt like small, smooth nuts. "The nuts grow in the high country," Swift River explained as he moved about the small cabin. Good food when bread is not available. Hannah bit into one tentatively. It had a mild, slightly sweet flavor, pleasant and surprisingly filling. The venison was tough but smoky and satisfying. She realized suddenly how famished she was, having eaten nothing since the previous morning. "You hunt alone?" she asked between bites, trying to piece together an understanding of this man who had saved her life. "When necessary," his answer was typically economical. She heard him moving about the cabin, gathering things, preparations of some kind underway. "What will you do with me?" Hannah finally asked, the question that had hovered in her mind since waking. Swift River paused in his activities. "That depends on what you wish, Hannah Miller." The use of her full name startled her. She had almost forgotten she had told him. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, the stark truth of it settling heavily. Between them, Clearfield Junction is 2 days' travel at least, if it even exists as promised. "I have no money, no family waiting." "Then why did you join the wagon train west?" Swift River asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Hannah's fingers tightened around the bark plate. "I had no choice. After my parents died, my sister and her husband took control of what little I had. When they decided to go west, I went with them or faced the poorhouse." The admission tasted bitter on her tongue. A blind woman has few options in this world. Silence followed her words, then Swift River spoke, his voice closer than before. "The Arapaho do not cast aside those who cannot see with their eyes. Such people often see more clearly with their spirits." He took the empty bark plate from her hands. "You have choices now that you did not have yesterday. You can try to reach the settlement alone. I will point the way if that is your wish. I can guide you there myself, which would take 2 days of travel, or—" He paused. "Or," Hannah prompted when he didn't continue, "or you can remain here for a time, learn to survive in this place, then decide your path when you are stronger." The offer stunned her. "Why would you do that? Why help me at all?" Swift River was quiet for a moment. "When I was a boy, my grandfather lost his sight in his final years. He was not abandoned, he was honored. His wisdom sought even more than before." He paused, then added more softly, "What your people did, it is not our way." The simplicity of his explanation humbled her. No grand declarations of chivalry or Christian charity, just a fundamental difference in how his people viewed worth and obligation. "I would stay," Hannah said before she could reconsider, "at least until I can be less of a burden." "Then we begin today," Swift River replied, and she could hear the nod in his voice. First lesson, the cabin and the land around it. What followed was unlike anything Hannah had experienced since losing her sight. Instead of being protected from knowledge of her surroundings, guided everywhere with minimal explanation, seated and left in corners, treated as fragile and incapable, Swift River methodically helped her map the world immediately available to her. He led her through the cabin, allowing her to touch the walls, teaching her to count steps between important features. 4 steps from sleeping mat to fire circle, 6 steps from fire to cabin entrance, 3 steps right of entrance to water, storage. Outside, he oriented her to the sun's warmth on her face. When you feel morning sun directly, you face east. Cabin opening faces southeast. Stream lies west and downhill. He placed a sturdy walking stick in her hands, showing her how to use it to detect obstacles before her feet found them. "Sweep in a small arc before each step," he instructed. "Listen to the sound it makes against different surfaces." Throughout the morning, Hannah concentrated intently, committing each detail to memory, determined to prove herself capable. By midday, she could navigate from her sleeping place to the cabin entrance without assistance. It was a small victory, but one that filled her with quiet pride. "You learn quickly," Swift River observed, as they shared a midday meal of nuts and berries he had gathered. "I've had 3 years to practice remembering what I cannot see," Hannah replied, "though no one before has taken the time to teach me properly. The ones who left you, they treated you as if your ears and mind were as blind as your eyes," Swift River said, cutting to the heart of how the Wrights had handled her disability. Hannah couldn't deny it. "They meant well, I suppose, at least at first. But I became a problem to be managed, not a person to be helped." "That is their failing, not yours," Swift River said simply. The afternoon brought new lessons. Swift River taught her to identify different trees by their bark texture and scent, how to tell which direction water flowed by its sound, how to recognize when animals were nearby by their movements through underbrush. "Tonight, we will make better sleeping mats," he explained as they returned to the cabin. "I will show you how to weave the grasses." As the sun began to set, a change Hannah perceived through the cooling air and subtle shift in forest sounds, Swift River built. Up the fire, the pleasant crackling and increased warmth signaling dinner preparations. "Your hands," Swift River said unexpectedly. "Show them to me." Puzzled, Hannah held them out. His fingers gently examined hers, turning them palm up. "Soft," he observed. "Not used to work." Heat crept into Hannah's cheeks. "I wasn't permitted to do much. Abigail feared I would break things or hurt myself. These hands must become stronger," he said matter-of-factly. "Tomorrow we begin with small tasks, weaving, fire building, food preparation." "You believe I can do these things?" Hannah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice, years of enforced helplessness having taken their toll on her confidence. "I know you can," Swift River replied with quiet certainty. "Blindness is not weakness, Hannah Miller. It is simply a different way of moving through the world." That night, as she lay on her sleeping mat, listening to the gentle pop and hiss of the dying fire, Hannah turned his words over in her mind. Different, not lesser. Capable, not helpless. The possibility unfurled within her like a tightly closed flower, sensing its first spring sunlight. For the first time since losing her sight, someone looked at her and saw potential instead of burden. The revelation was both terrifying and exhilarating. Sleep came slowly, her mind too active with plans and possibilities for the days ahead. Just before consciousness slipped away, a sudden realization jolted through her. She had not once today wished to be found by the Wrights or the caravan. Whatever uncertain future lay before her, Hannah Miller had already taken her first step toward freedom, not despite her blindness, but with it as simply another facet of who she was. Days melted into one another as Hannah settled into a routine that would have been unimaginable in her previous life. Each morning began with Swift River's quiet voice rousing her from sleep, followed by simple but nourishing meals and tasks, designed to strengthen both her body and her confidence. On the 5th day, rain returned, gentler than the storm that had stranded her, but persistent enough to keep them largely confined to the cabin. The constant patter against the roof created a soothing rhythm that Hannah found herself unconsciously matching as she worked on weaving a small basket from river reeds Swift River had collected the previous day. "Your fingers are learning the patterns," Swift River observed as he sat nearby, fashioning new arrowheads from stone with methodical precision. The soft scraping sound provided a counterpoint to her weaving. Hannah paused, running her fingers over her work. The basket was crude compared to what Swift River could produce, but the reeds bent to her will more readily than they had when she first attempted the skill. "I've never created anything useful before," she admitted. "In my father's house, I played piano and embroidered decorative things. After losing my sight, I wasn't trusted to do even that much." Swift River made a non-committal sound, neither judgment nor pity. Different skills for different worlds. Here, what you make keeps you alive. A sudden gust of wind drove rain into the cabin entrance, bringing with it the rich, loamy scent of wet earth. Hannah lifted her face toward the cooler air, inhaling deeply. "The rain smells different here than in Pennsylvania," she observed. "Wilder somehow." "You are learning to read the world through senses beyond sight," Swift River said, approval warming his typically measured tone. "What else do you notice?" Hannah closed her eyes, a habit from her sighted days that helped her concentrate. "The birds are quiet now, but they'll sing when the rain stops. The stream runs faster today. I can hear the difference in its voice." She hesitated, uncertain of this last observation. "Speak," Swift River encouraged. "There's tension in the air, a heaviness that wasn't there yesterday." Swift River set down his work, the stone scraper falling silent. "Good, you sense the changing pressure. Storm's not finished. Bigger weather comes." Hannah's hands stilled on her basket. "Like the one that separated me from the caravan?" "Perhaps. Nature speaks warnings to those who listen." Swift River moved toward the cabin entrance. She could hear him arranging something, additional protection against the coming weather, she guessed. "Will we be safe here?" she asked, a flutter of anxiety stirring in her chest. "Cabin has stood through many seasons," Swift River replied, "but we prepare. First rule of survival: respect what you cannot control." Throughout the afternoon, they worked to secure their shelter. Swift River guided Hannah's hands as they piled stones to divert water from the entrance, arranged their supplies higher against the cabin walls, and gathered additional firewood while it was still relatively dry. As evening approached, the wind intensified, howling through the trees with increasing ferocity. The temperature dropped sharply, and Swift River built the fire higher than usual. "Cold comes with this storm," he explained as he placed a warm cup of pine needle tea in Hannah's hands. "Drink. It will help keep sickness away." The tea was bitter but not unpleasant, with a resinous fragrance that reminded her of Christmas. As she sipped, Hannah realized how much her perception of comfort had changed in less than a week. The hard wooden floor covered with woven mats, the simple fare, the close quarters with a man who had been a stranger days ago, all would have horrified her former self. Now they represented safety and survival. "You're quiet," Swift River observed. After a time, Hannah cradled the warm cup between her palms. "I was thinking about how quickly we adapt when we must. A week ago, I slept in a wagon and ate from tin plates. I worried about propriety and appearances." She gave a small, rueful laugh. "Now I'm grateful for pine needle tea and a dry place to sleep." "Humans carry too many unnecessary concerns," Swift River said. "Nature strips them away, leaves what matters." His philosophy was so different from the complex social rules that had governed Hannah's life. Simpler, more direct, yet containing profound truth. The storm intensified as night fell fully, rain lashing at the cabin entrance and wind shrieking through the forest beyond. Occasional crashes indicated falling branches or trees succumbing to the gale. Swift River added more wood to the fire. "Sleep may be difficult tonight," he warned. "Storm speaks loudly." Hannah wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders, unable to suppress a shiver that wasn't entirely from cold. "It sounds angry." "Nature is not angry or kind," Swift River replied. "It simply is. Human minds seek meaning in what has no meaning." A particularly violent gust sent embers swirling from the fire, accompanied by the distant crack of splitting wood. Swift River moved quickly to stamp out any stray sparks. "That was close," Hannah said, her heart beating faster. "Yes, we should—" Swift River stopped abruptly, his sudden silence more alarming than any words. "What is it?" Hannah asked, tension coiling in her stomach. "Listen," he instructed, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Hannah strained her ears past the storm's chaos. At first, she heard nothing unusual, then a low, rumbling growl emanated from near the cabin entrance. The sound raised the hair on her arms. "Mountain lion," Swift River breathed so quietly she almost didn't hear him. seeking shelter from the storm. Fear clutched at Hannah's throat, nearly choking her. "What do we do?" she whispered back. "Be still. Fire will keep it at the entrance. Most times they avoid humans. Most times." The qualifier hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Hannah heard Swift River moving with deliberate slowness. The soft scrape of metal suggested he was retrieving his knife or perhaps the small axe he used for chopping wood. The growl came again, louder this time. Hannah could picture the creature. Tawny fur, powerful shoulders, eyes gleaming in the firelight. She had seen one once, years ago, mounted in a wealthy neighbor's study. Even in death, it had radiated lethal grace. "If it comes closer," Swift River murmured, "move behind me, slowly." Hannah nodded, belatedly realizing he might not see the gesture in the dimness. "Yes," she whispered. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The mountain lion paced at the cabin entrance, occasionally growling or making strange plaintive cries that sounded eerily human. The storm continued unabated, likely driving the predator to seek any available shelter. Swift River remained vigilant, periodically adding wood to the fire to maintain a bright barrier between them and the big cat. Hannah sat perfectly still, hands clenched in her lap, every sense heightened by fear. "It's moving closer," she whispered suddenly, certain despite her blindness. She could feel the animal's presence, a shift in the air, a tension that hadn't been there moments before. "Now," Swift River said quietly, "behind me." Hannah slid backward, careful not to make sudden movements. Her hand found Swift River's shoulder as he positioned himself between her and the threat. She could feel the tense readiness in his muscles. A snarl ripped through the cabin, followed by the distinct sound of padded paws on stone. The mountain lion had entered their shelter. Swift River spoke suddenly, not in English but in Arapaho, his voice low but commanding. The words meant nothing to Hannah, but the tone conveyed clear warning. The big cat growled in response. Hannah could smell it now, a musky, wild scent overlaid with the sharper smell of wet fur. Swift River shifted slightly, and she heard the rasp of metal, his hunting knife being drawn. He spoke again, the strange syllables rolling from his tongue with quiet authority. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The mountain lion roared, a sound so primal and powerful that Hannah felt it in her bones. Swift River surged forward with explosive energy. There was a confusion of sounds, snarling, the scuffle of movement, a pained grunt from Swift River that sent Hannah's heart into her throat. Then a final, terrible yowl from the mountain lion, followed by the heavy thud of a large body hitting the cabin floor. Silence descended, broken only by Swift River's labored breathing and the continuing rage of the storm outside. "Swift River!" Hannah called anxiously. "Are you hurt?" "Scratched," he replied, his voice strained. "Not serious." She heard him moving, dragging something heavy. "The cat. Dead. It will provide food and fur when the storm passes." Hannah released a shuddering breath. "You saved my life. Again." "We saved each other," Swift River corrected. "Your warning gave me time to prepare." He returned to her side, and she reached out instinctively, her fingers finding his arm. Warm wetness met her touch. "You're bleeding," she said with alarm. "Small wounds," Swift River insisted, though his voice betrayed pain he wouldn't otherwise acknowledge. "Need cleaning." Hannah straightened her shoulders. "Tell me what to do." For once, Swift River didn't object to her help. "Water in the small pot by the fire, clean cloth in my bundle." With careful movements, Hannah located the items. "Guide my hands," she requested. Swift River directed her as she cleaned his wounds, 3 deep scratches across his forearm where the mountain lion's claws had found their mark. The injuries weren't life-threatening, but they clearly caused significant pain. Plants in a leather pouch, Swift River instructed. Crushed yarrow leaves. Apply to cuts. Hannah followed his instructions, her touch gentle but sure as she dressed his wounds. A profound role reversal settled over her. For the first time, Swift River needed her help, not the other way around. "You did well," Swift River said when she had finished bandaging his arm. "Steady hands." "I've had practice," Hannah replied, allowing a small smile. 3 years of learning to do everything by touch." As they settled back beside the fire, the storm still raging outside, but the more immediate danger past, Hannah felt a curious sense of accomplishment mingled with lingering fear. "Will there be more?" she asked. "Mountain lions?" "Not likely," Swift River assured her. "They hunt alone, claim large territories." He paused. "But wilderness holds many dangers, some with claws, some with guns." His words reminded Hannah that they existed in a precarious space, not just between civilization and wilderness, but between two colliding worlds with long histories of violence and mistrust. "Is that why you live alone?" she asked, the question escaping before she could consider its propriety. Swift River was quiet for so long that Hannah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of painful memory. "I have walked too long between worlds to belong fully to either." In that simple statement, Hannah heard echoes of her own isolation. Different in cause, but perhaps similar. In effect, both of them existed on the margins, navigating boundaries others took for granted. The storm outside began to abate, the wind's howl softening to a moan. The immediate dangers had passed, but as Hannah drifted toward exhausted sleep, Swift River's words lingered in her mind. The wilderness had teeth and claws, yes, but so did the world of men, and she was no longer certain which presented the greater threat. The morning after the mountain lion attack dawned clear and cold. Hannah woke to the unfamiliar weight of a new fur across her sleeping mat, the pelt of the great cat, carefully cleaned and prepared while she slept. "You were busy last night," she observed, running her fingers through the surprisingly soft fur. "Waste nothing," Swift River replied simply. "The cat gives us warmth, meat, and tools. Its spirit deserves respect." Over breakfast, roasted mountain lion meat that tasted gamey but satisfying, Swift River announced their plans for the day. "Today we leave the cabin," he said. "You must learn the surrounding land." Hannah felt a flutter of anxiety. "Is your arm well enough?" The scratches had been deep, the bandaging extensive. "It will heal," Swift River replied, dismissing his injury with characteristic stoicism. "Knowledge of the land cannot wait. Storm has passed, but spring floods rise." The implications were clear. Her survival depended on expanding her understanding beyond their immediate shelter. Outside, the air held the crisp clarity that follows major storms. Hannah inhaled deeply, detecting subtle changes in the forest. Fresher scents where rain had washed away dust, the sharp tang of broken pine branches, the earthy perfume of mushrooms suddenly sprouting in dampened soil. "Take your walking stick," Swift River instructed. "Today we make a map you can carry here." He tapped her forehead gently. What followed was unlike any lesson Hannah had experienced. Swift River guided her in expanding circles outward from the cabin, teaching her to identify landmarks through touch, sound, and scent. He showed her how sloping ground always indicated direction, how the sun's warmth on her face oriented her, how streams and animal paths created navigation lines through the wilderness. "The forest speaks constantly," he explained as they paused, beside a fallen oak. "Wind through pine needles sounds different than through oak leaves. Morning birds sing in different locations than evening birds. Deer paths run east-west. Creek flows to the river southward." Hannah absorbed these lessons. Eagerly, constructing a mental map far more complex than she would have believed possible days earlier. When Swift River unexpectedly stepped away, telling her to find her own path back to the cabin, anxiety surged briefly before determination took its place. She stood still, orienting herself. The sun's warmth fell on her right cheek. West, then. The ground sloped subtly downward toward the stream. North. That meant the cabin lay southeast. Hannah tapped her walking stick against the ground, finding the barely perceptible deer trail Swift River had shown her earlier. She followed it confidently, counting steps under her breath. At a distinctive rock formation, a jutting stone shelf, she had learned to recognize by touch. She turned eastward, following the sound of wind through a stand of young pines. 23 steps later, her stick detected the slight depression that marked the final approach to the cabin. "I've returned," she called, unable to keep pride from her voice. Swift River's answering footsteps emerged from inside the cabin. "You found the way without hesitation," he observed. "Faster than yesterday." "Yesterday?" Hannah questioned. Momentarily confused, a rare chuckle escaped Swift River. "You thought that was the first time I left you to find your own path? I have watched over you each day, stepping aside to let you navigate alone. Today is simply the first time I told you of it." Hannah wasn't sure whether to feel indignant or grateful. "You've been testing me." "Teaching you," Swift River corrected. "Confidence comes from doing, not from being told you can do." His words struck her deeply. How different from the anxious hovering of the rights, their constant reminders of her limitations, their insistence on protecting her from even the possibility of self-sufficiency. "Thank you," she said finally, "for believing I could before I knew it myself." Hannah woke to the gentle touch of Morningstar's hand on her shoulder. Outside, the village remained quiet. The hour earlier than even the most industrious Arapaho typically began their day. "It is time," the medicine woman whispered. "The council has reached a decision." Though she had slept little, Hannah rose. Immediately, her hands finding the borrowed buckskin dress laid out for her the previous night. In the 3 days since her arrival at the village, time had acquired a strange, compressed quality. Moments of extraordinary learning, alternating with tense periods of waiting as scouts brought reports of the soldiers' movements. "Has something happened?" Hannah asked, quickly changing into the soft, practical garment. "The men who search for you have made camp at Whispering Pines Meadow," Morningstar replied, helping Hannah secure a woven belt around her waist. "They will reach our hunting grounds by midday if they maintain their pace." Hannah's heart quickened. Whispering Pines was less than half a day's journey from the village, far closer than anyone had anticipated. "The rights are still with them. Yes, the woman and man who claim to be your kin ride with the soldiers. They speak with great concern about their blind sister, lost and helpless in the wilderness." Morningstar's tone conveyed her skepticism. "Strange how those who abandon you in a flood now risk so much to find you." Hannah's fingers paused on the leather ties of her moccasins. The medicine woman's observation crystallized a question that had troubled her since learning of the search party. "They want something from me," she murmured. "But what? I have nothing of value." "All will be revealed in council," Morningstar said, guiding Hannah from the dwelling into the pre-dawn chill. "Come, they wait for us." The council lodge felt different in these early hours, more intimate, the air heavy with significance. Fewer people were present, only those essential to the decision at hand. Chief Many Horses, White Bear, Running Elk, Swift River, and several elders Hannah recognized by their voices, but not their names. "Hannah Miller," the chief began as soon as she was seated, his words translated by Swift River. "What we speak of now must remain among those present. The safety of many depends on this." "I understand," Hannah replied, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I owe your people my life. Your secrets are safe with me." The chief spoke again, longer this time. Swift River translated carefully, his voice pitched low despite the privacy of the council lodge. Our scouts have learned more about those who search for you. The soldiers carry official documents granting them authority to recover not just a missing settler, but a vital object of territorial security, a map they claim you possess. Hannah's confusion must have shown on her face. I have no map. Everything I owned was in my bundle, and it contains nothing of value to anyone but me. A new voice joined the conversation, one of the elders, a man called Stone Catcher, whose knowledge of settler ways was respected in council. The woman speaks truth, he said in surprisingly clear English, yet her sister and brother by marriage insist she carries a map showing the location of a great gold deposit. They say her father discovered it before his death, but told only his blind daughter to protect the secret. My father. Hannah shook her head in bewilderment. He was a weaver and farmer, not a prospector. He never mentioned gold to me. Swift River leaned closer. Did he give you anything before he died? Something you might carry with you always? Hannah's hand rose instinctively to her throat, where the silver pendant containing her parents' portrait hung beneath her dress. Only this, she said, drawing it out, a family memento with their likenesses inside. The pendant passed from hand to hand around the circle, examined with increasing interest. When it returned to Swift River, his voice held a new tension. Hannah, this pendant bears markings on its reverse. Not just decorative patterns, but a form of writing, symbols that match those used on old tribal boundary markers in the high country. A map, White Bear said flatly, hidden in plain sight. Hannah's fingers trembled as she reached for the pendant, exploring its back surface with newfound attention. Beyond the scrollwork she had always assumed was mere decoration, she could now feel subtle lines and dots pressed into the silver, a pattern she had never had reason to examine closely before. My father never told me, she whispered, shock coursing through her. Had this been his secret, a hidden map to gold entrusted to his blind daughter who couldn't see what she carried? The Wrights must have learned of it somehow, Running Elk suggested. Perhaps your father spoke of it to others before his death. When they abandoned you in the flood, they believed the pendant lost with you, convenient for them. Now they discover you might have survived, and their precious map with you. The revelation struck Hannah like a physical blow. Not only had Ezekiel and Abigail abandoned her to die, but they had done so believing they were erasing evidence of their planned treachery. Their subsequent search was motivated not by remorse, but by greed and fear that she might have survived, to expose their actions. Where does this map lead? She asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Morningstar answered, having studied the markings while others spoke. To Thunder Ridge, 3 days' journey west of here, a place sacred to many tribes, where waters spring from stone and the earth yields yellow metal close to its surface. Gold in Arapaho hunting territory, Chief Many Horses clarified. Land protected by treaty, but treaties matter little when gold fever strikes. The implications unfolded in Hannah's mind with terrible clarity. If the soldiers recovered the pendant and confirmed the location of gold, no treaty would protect the Arapaho lands. The consequences would reach far beyond. Her own fate, endless waves of miners, displaced tribes, violence inevitable as worlds collided. What would you have me do? She asked, addressing the chief directly. A heavy silence fell over the council lodge. When Many Horses spoke again, his words carried the weight of a decision reached after long deliberation. The pendant must never reach the soldiers. Yet if you remain here, they will eventually find our village. If you flee alone, they will hunt you down. There is only one path that serves both your safety and ours. Swift River took up the translation. You must journey to Thunder Ridge itself, guided by one who knows the way. There, the pendant can be hidden where no settler will find it. Meanwhile, others will create false trails to confuse those who pursue you. Hannah understood immediately what was being proposed. She would become the bait in a dangerous game of misdirection, drawing the soldiers and the rites away from the village, while simultaneously preventing them from reaching the gold deposit. "I will do it," she said without hesitation. "But who will guide me?" "I will," Swift River answered, his hand briefly touching hers in reassurance. "White Bear will lead the false trail to the north. Running Elk will monitor the soldiers' movements. We leave within the hour, before full light reveals our departure." The meeting concluded with swift efficiency, each person assigned specific responsibilities in the plan. As Hannah rose to leave, Morning Star drew her aside, pressing a small leather pouch into her hands. "Medicines," the older woman explained, "and this." She placed a second object in Hannah's palm, smooth, round, small enough to conceal in a closed fist. Hannah's fingers explored it carefully. "A stone? River agate," Morningstar confirmed. "It absorbs the warmth of its keeper. When danger approaches, it grows cool against the skin. An old belief, perhaps, but old beliefs sometimes carry wisdom newer ways have forgotten." Hannah slipped both gifts into the small pack she would carry. "Thank you for everything you've taught me. You have learned quickly what took others seasons to understand," Morningstar replied. "Remember, the truly blind are those who refuse to see with more than their eyes." Preparations for departure moved with practiced efficiency. Hannah's pack was kept deliberately light: dried meat, pine nuts, a water skin, flint for fire making, and Morningstar's medicines. Her clothing was transformed. Buckskins replaced her settler's dress, her hair was arranged in Arapaho style, and a mixture of herbs was rubbed into her skin to mask her human scent. Swift River worked mostly in silence, his movements quick and purposeful. Hannah sensed his tension, the responsibility for her safety now squarely on his shoulders, while the village's security depended on their successful evasion of the search. "Party. The first day will be hardest," he told her as they made final preparations. "We must cover difficult ground quickly, staying off established paths." "I'm ready," Hannah assured him, adjusting her pack with more confidence than she had shown when they first met. In the time since the flood, her body had grown stronger, her movements more assured, her other senses sharper in compensation for her blindness. As they stood at the village edge, waiting for the signal to depart, Chief Many Horses approached. He spoke briefly to Swift River, then addressed Hannah directly in his accented English. "You make a difficult choice, Hannah Miller. Few from your world would risk themselves for people not their own." Hannah tilted her face toward the chief's voice. "Your people showed me kindness when mine showed cruelty. The choice isn't difficult at all." The chief made a soft sound of acknowledgement. "Swift River has 7 days to complete this journey. If you have not returned by then, we must assume the worst and move our village deeper into the mountains." The gravity of their mission settled more heavily on Hannah's shoulders. This wasn't merely about her safety or even the gold deposit. The entire village's future hung in the balance. "We'll return," she promised, "or at least I'll ensure the pendant never falls into the wrong hands." White Bear gave the signal. 3 short owl calls, indicating the scouts had confirmed the search party was still at their camp. It was time to depart. They left from the western edge of the village, taking a narrow deer path that wound through dense pine forest before climbing steeply into the foothills. Swift River set a demanding pace, stopping only when absolutely necessary to allow Hannah to orient herself to new terrain. By mid-morning, the path had disappeared entirely. They traveled across bare stone when possible, leaving no footprints to follow. Swift River guided Hannah with quiet efficiency, his hand occasionally touching her elbow to indicate a change in direction or a difficult passage ahead. "Listen," he said suddenly, stopping so abruptly that Hannah nearly collided with him. She stilled her breathing, opening her awareness to the forest around them. At first, she heard nothing unusual: birds calling, the distant murmur of a stream, wind through pine needles. Then she caught it, the faint but distinctive sound of metal striking metal, carried on the breeze from far behind them. "The search party has broken camp," Swift River confirmed. "They move earlier than expected. Toward the village, yes, but White Bear's false trail should draw them north before they get too close." He took her hand, leading her onward. "We must reach the high passes by nightfall. There is shelter there and better protection." The day's journey tested Hannah's endurance beyond anything she had experienced before. The terrain grew increasingly challenging. Rocky slopes gave way to narrow ridgelines, stream crossings required careful navigation, and fallen trees created obstacles that sometimes forced lengthy detours. Yet she found herself moving with growing confidence, her body adapting to the wilderness in ways that would have seemed impossible weeks earlier. By late afternoon, the air had taken on the thin, crisp quality of higher elevation. Hannah's legs burned with exhaustion, but she refused to slow their pace. When Swift River finally called a halt near sunset, they had climbed high enough that the temperature had dropped significantly, the wind carrying a biting edge. "We make camp here," he said, guiding her into what felt like a small clearing sheltered by overhanging rock. "The soldiers cannot climb these slopes in darkness. We are safe until morning." While Swift River gathered firewood, Hannah set about organizing their camp using the skills he had taught her. She cleared a fire circle by feel, collected pine needles for their sleeping mats, and arranged their supplies for easy access. When Swift River returned, she heard his quiet sound of approval. "You've become a woman of the mountains in very little time," he observed, striking flint to steel to kindle their small fire. "I had an excellent teacher," Hannah replied, warming her hands over the growing flames, "though I still have much to learn." As they shared a simple meal of dried meat and pine nuts, Swift River described their location and the journey ahead. They had reached the foothills of Thunder Ridge, having traveled nearly twice the distance normally possible in a single day. Tomorrow would bring even more difficult terrain. Narrow passes between sheer cliffs, fields of loose shale that could trigger landslides if crossed carelessly, and higher elevations where the air would grow thinner and colder. "The hunting grounds of mountain lion and eagle," he explained. "Few Arapaho come here except for special purposes. The land demands respect." "Have you been to the place the pendant shows?" Hannah asked, her fingers absently tracing the silver oval that now hung hidden beneath her buckskin dress. Swift River was quiet for a moment. "Once, as a boy, my grandfather brought me to the sacred waters. He spoke of the yellow metal in the earth, but warned it carried a curse for those who sought it with greed in their hearts." "Do you believe that?" "I believe greed itself is the curse," he replied. "I have watched it transform good men into monsters, turn neighbors against each other, make the earth itself bleed." They fell silent, the crackling fire and night sounds of the mountain forest creating a peaceful counterpoint to the gravity of their mission. Hannah found herself contemplating the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. Blind, hunted, sitting beside an Arapaho guide on a mountainside far from any settler's path. Had the flood not separated her from the caravan, had Swift River not found her, had the rites not betrayed her, none of this would have unfolded. "You're thinking deeply," Swift River observed. "About paths not taken," Hannah admitted. "About how what seemed like tragedy opened doors I never knew existed." Swift River added wood to the fire before responding. The Arapaho believe all rivers eventually reach the same great water, though they follow different paths to get there. Perhaps your river simply took an unexpected turn. The philosophical idea comforted Hannah as she settled onto her pine needle mat, the mountain lion pelt Swift River had given her, providing warmth against the night's chill. Despite the danger that pursued them, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt a curious sense of rightness, as if she had found her true path precisely when she had seemed most lost. They departed before dawn, eating a cold breakfast. To avoid the telltale smoke of a morning fire, the air held the sharp edge of frost, and Hannah's breath clouded before her face as Swift River described the day's journey. We follow the ridge for half the day, then descend into Shadow Valley before climbing the second ridge. The way narrows in places. You must stay close. Have the soldiers followed our trail? Hannah asked, adjusting her pack. Unlikely. White Bear would have sent warning, but we move as if they are just behind us. Caution keeps us alive. The morning's travel proved even more challenging than the previous day. The path frequently narrowed to barely a foot's width, with steep drops that Hannah could sense but not see. Swift River guided her with extraordinary patience, sometimes describing each footfall before she took it. Step here where the stone is flat, now left to avoid the loose edge. Good. 3 more steps like this, then we turn right against the cliff face. Hannah followed his instructions with complete trust, her other senses compensating for her lack of sight. She could feel subtle changes in air movement that indicated open space to her left or right, could hear the different ways sound echoed off stone when they passed through narrow defiles, could smell the distinct scents of various shrubs and lichens that clung to the rocky slopes. By midday, they had reached a high point where the wind blew steadily from the west, carrying the clean, sharp scent of snow from distant peaks. They paused briefly to rest and eat, Swift River kneeling, suddenly to examine the ground. "What is it?" Hannah asked, sensing his tension. "Tracks, recent, perhaps from this morning." Hannah knelt beside him, her fingers gently exploring where he indicated. She felt the subtle impression in the thin soil, not a clear footprint, but the disturbance of the ground surface where something heavy had passed. An animal? No. His voice had dropped to a near whisper. "The marks are wrong. This was made by a boot, a white man's boot." Cold fear trickled down Hannah's spine. The soldiers? But how could they have gotten ahead of us? Not all of them. Perhaps a scout sent to circle around while the main party followed White Bear's false trail. Swift River rose, scanning the terrain around them. "We must change course. Now." They abandoned their planned route, moving instead along a precipitous game trail that descended sharply into a ravine. The going was treacherous. Loose stones threatened to trigger slides with every step, and the narrow path frequently disappeared altogether, forcing them to create their own way forward. By mid-afternoon, Hannah's legs trembled with exhaustion, and even Swift River's steady pace had slowed. The temperature had dropped further, and a damp mist had settled around them, limiting visibility and creating a slick sheen on the rocky surfaces they traversed. "We must find shelter soon," Swift River said, his voice tight with controlled concern. "The weather turns against us." As if in confirmation, the first drops of cold rain began to fall, a slow patter that quickly intensified into a steady downpour. Hannah felt the river agate in her pocket grow suddenly cool against her skin, morning star's warning echoing in her mind. "Someone's nearby," she whispered to Swift River. "I can feel it." He didn't question her intuition, instead drawing her closer to the cliff face, where a slight overhang provided minimal protection from the rain. They stood motionless, listening intently as the rainfall masked most forest sounds. Then Hannah heard it, the distinctive sound of a rifle being cocked somewhere above and behind them. Swift River heard it too, his body tensing beside hers. "Come out where I can see you," a man's voice called, unnaturally loud in the rain-soaked stillness. "I know you're there, Injun, and I reckon that's our missing blind girl with you." Hannah recognized the voice with a jolt of shock and anger. Not a soldier at all, but Ezekiel Wright, her brother-in-law, the man who had abandoned her to die in the flood. Somehow he had separated from the main search party, circling ahead to cut off their escape route. Swift River's hand found hers, squeezing once in silent communication. She understood his meaning. They were trapped on the narrow ledge, with Ezekiel above them and a sheer drop below. Any sudden movement might trigger a shot. "Hannah?" Ezekiel called again. "I know you're down there." Abigail's been beside herself. With worry, the whole search party's been looking for you. The brazen lie ignited something in Hannah, a fierce protective anger that burned away her fear. She stepped forward, away from the cliff face, ignoring Swift River's attempt to restrain her. "After you left me to die in the flood?" she called back, her voice carrying clearly despite the rain. "How convenient that you suddenly care about my welfare, Ezekiel." A moment of silence followed, then her brother-in-law's voice again, closer now as he moved down the slope toward them. "It wasn't like that, Hannah. We got separated in the chaos. We searched for hours before the expedition. Leader made us move on. We thought you were dead until a trapper reported seeing a blind woman with an Indian guide." "More lies," Hannah said steadily. "You called my name 3 times, Ezekiel," Abigail cried. "Then you left. My Arapaho friend heard it all before he rescued me." "Your friend has filled your head with nonsense," Ezekiel replied, close enough, now that Hannah could hear the squelch of his boots on the rain-soaked ground. "Come back with me, Hannah. The soldiers will escort us safely to Clearfield Junction. You'll be with family again." "I know about the pendant, Ezekiel." Hannah's words cut through his pretense like a knife. "I know what my father hid on it. I know why you really want me back." The silence that followed confirmed everything. When Ezekiel spoke again, the false concern had vanished from his voice, replaced by cold calculation. "So the savage told you, did he? Fine. Yes, there's gold in these mountains, Hannah, enough to make us rich beyond imagining. Your father found it years ago but was too principled to claim it, said it was on Indian land and protected by treaty." He gave a humorless laugh. "Treaties with savages aren't worth the paper they're written on. That gold belongs to those with the courage to take it." "It belongs to no one," Hannah replied, "least of all to a man who would abandon his sister-in-law to die." "Don't be a fool," Ezekiel snapped. "You're blind, Hannah. What kind of life do you think awaits you with these primitives? Come with me now, give me the pendant, and I'll ensure you're comfortable for the rest of your days." "Refuse," and the unmistakable sound of a drawn bowstring interrupted his threat. Swift River had moved silently to Hannah's side, arrow nocked and aimed at Ezekiel. "She has chosen her path," Swift River said, his English clear and cold as the mountain stream, "as have you by threatening her life." Ezekiel's response was the crack of a rifle shot. Hannah felt Swift River push her roughly aside as the bullet whistled past. She stumbled, lost her footing on the rain-slick stone, and felt herself sliding toward the edge of the precipice. Her hands scrabbled desperately for purchase, finding nothing but loose shale that came away in her grasp. For one terrible moment, she teetered on the brink of the drop, the void yawning beneath her. Then Swift River's hand closed around her wrist, arresting her fall. With extraordinary strength, he pulled her back from the edge while simultaneously positioning himself between her and Ezekiel. The tableau held for a breathless moment, Ezekiel fumbling to reload his rifle, Swift River with arrow drawn, Hannah crouched behind him on the narrow ledge. "The soldiers will find us soon," Ezekiel warned, his voice tight with anger. "You can't escape." "We don't need to escape," Swift River replied calmly. "Only to delay you long enough." With those cryptic words, he released the bowstring. Hannah heard Ezekiel's cry of pain, followed by the clatter of the rifle falling among the rocks. Not a killing shot, she realized, but one calculated to disarm and incapacitate. "Come," Swift River urged, guiding her quickly along the ledge. "We must reach the sacred waters before dark." They moved faster now, abandoning caution for speed. Hannah followed Swift River's guidance with absolute trust, her feet finding purchase where by all rights she should have fallen. Behind them, Ezekiel's shouts faded into the distance, lost in the steady drumming of the rain. The afternoon blurred into a desperate race against time and weather. They climbed higher, the rain eventually turning to sleet as the temperature continued to drop. Hannah's hands grew numb, her face stung by the icy pellets, but she pushed onward, driven by the knowledge that everything, her life, Swift River's safety, the future of the Arapaho village, depended on reaching their destination. As dusk approached, the sleet stopped abruptly. The sudden silence was broken only by their labored breathing and the distant murmur of moving water. "We're close," Swift River said, his voice carrying a note of reverence. "Can you hear it? The sacred waters." Hannah tilted her head, listening intently. Beyond the usual mountain sounds, she distinguished a rhythmic pulse, water falling from height, striking stone, pooling and flowing onward. But there was something else, a harmonic quality to the sound that seemed almost musical. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "You hear it truly," Swift River confirmed. "The waters sing here. My people believe the Creator's voice lives in that song." He guided her forward more carefully now, the path leveling out as they approached the source of the sound. The air changed subtly, carrying minerality and a curious electrical quality that made the fine hairs on Hannah's arms rise. "We have arrived," Swift River announced, leading her to a stop, the sacred waters of Thunder Ridge. Hannah stood still, absorbing the environment through her remaining senses. They were in some kind of basin or hollow, protected from the wind that had buffeted them during their climb. The singing waters sounded closer now, a waterfall, she guessed, emptying into a pool before continuing its journey downward. "Describe it to me," she requested softly. Swift River's voice took on a quality she had never heard before, a blend of reverence and wonder, as if the place transformed him somehow. "We stand at the edge of a perfect circle of water, clear as the sky after rain. It is fed by a waterfall that drops straight down from the mountainside above, white as a bridal veil. The pool is ringed with stones that gleam with colors, red, yellow, green, blue, each catching the last light of day like frozen fire. Behind the fall, a cave mouth opens into the mountain's heart. That is where we must go." Hannah let his words paint the image in her mind, creating a vision more vivid than sight might have provided. "It sounds like a place from a legend." "It is," Swift River agreed, "many legends. This place belongs to all tribes, none claiming ownership. Even in times of war, enemies would meet here in peace to listen to the water's wisdom." He took her hand again, leading her carefully around the pool's edge. Hannah could feel the spray from the waterfall as they approached, cool droplets caressing her face like a blessing. The singing quality grew louder, resolving into complex harmonics that seemed impossible for mere water against stone to produce. "We must pass behind the waterfall," Swift River explained. "The path is narrow but solid. I will guide you step by step." Hannah nodded, squeezing his hand in silent trust. They edged sideways along a stone shelf, the roar of the falling water growing deafening as they approached its curtain. For a moment, they were enveloped in its flow, cold, overwhelming, purifying. Then they passed through into sudden quiet, the waterfall's voice muted to a background murmur. "The cave," Hannah asked, her voice echoing strangely in the enclosed space. Yes, an ancient place. Few have entered in living memory. Swift River released her hand, but stayed close. Wait here while I make light. Hannah heard the distinctive sounds of flint striking steel, then smelled the resinous scent of pine pitch catching fire. A warm glow bloomed in the darkness. A torch, she realized, that Swift River must have prepared despite the soaking rain of their journey. This way, he said, returning to guide her deeper into the cave. Watch your step. The ground is uneven. The cave extended further than Hannah had expected, twisting deeper into the mountain's heart. The air grew warmer rather than colder. As they progressed, with a distinctive mineral scent suggesting hot springs somewhere in the depths, the acoustics changed too. The singing of the waterfall transformed into something more complex, as if the very stone around them had joined the chorus. Finally, Swift River brought them to a halt. "We have reached the sacred chamber," he said, his voice hushed with respect. Hannah sensed they had entered a larger space. The sound of their breathing expanded around them, suggesting high ceilings and distant walls. The air felt different too, charged with an energy she couldn't name but could certainly feel, like the prickling sensation before a lightning storm. "The pendant," Swift River said. "It must be placed on the guardian stone." Hannah removed the silver oval from around her neck, holding it out. Instead of taking it, Swift River guided her hand forward until her fingers touched something cool and smooth, a natural stone column rising from the cave floor, its surface worn to silken texture by uncounted years of ceremonial handling. "You must place it yourself," he explained. "The one who carried it here must complete the journey." Hannah hesitated, suddenly reluctant to part with her last connection to her parents. Swift River seemed to sense her hesitation. "The images inside are still yours to keep," he said gently. "Only the map on the reverse must remain here, beyond the reach of those who would misuse its knowledge." Understanding, Hannah carefully opened the pendant, removing the small portrait it contained. She closed the silver casing again, then placed it into a natural depression at the top of the stone column, a space that seemed formed specifically for this purpose. As soon as the pendant touched the stone, the singing waters changed their tune. The harmonic vibration intensified, resonating through the cave with new complexity. Hannah felt, rather than heard, the shift, a rebalancing, as if something long out of alignment had been restored to its proper place. "It is done, Swift," River said, a note of wonder in his voice. "The circle closes." "What happens now?" Hannah asked, clutching her parents' portrait in her closed hand. "Now we return to the village, while White Bear continues to lead the soldiers on a false trail. By the time they realize they've been misled, the spring floods will have risen, further making these mountains impassable until summer. And the pendant? It remains here, protected by powers older than either of our peoples. Your father's secret stays safe, as he intended." Hannah contemplated this resolution, finding unexpected peace in it. The gold would remain undisturbed, the Arapaho lands protected, at least for now. And she? "What about me, Swift River? Where do I belong now?" In the torch's glow, she sensed him move closer. His hand found hers, warm and steadying as it had been throughout their journey. "You belong wherever you choose, Hannah Miller, with the Arapaho if that is your wish, or at the settlement if you prefer, or perhaps somewhere between worlds as I have chosen." "Between worlds," Hannah repeated softly, the concept resonating within her. Not fully of either, but seeing both more clearly for it. "Yes," Swift River agreed. "Those who walk between worlds carry a special vision, one that does not depend on eyes but on understanding." Hannah realized then that her blindness, long considered her greatest limitation, had in fact prepared her for this unique path. Unable to rely on sight, She had developed other ways of perceiving and navigating the world, skills that now allowed her to bridge two cultures in ways few others could. "I choose the path between," she said firmly. "With you, if you'll have me as a companion on that journey." Swift River's answer was not in words, but in the gentle pressure of his fingers intertwining with hers, a silent promise, a connection forged through danger and trust that transcended the barriers between their worlds. Together, they made their way back through the cave, past the singing waterfall, and down the mountain paths that would eventually lead them home, not to the Wrights and their wagon train, not exclusively to the Arapaho village, but to a new life carved from the wilderness between established borders. Hannah Miller, once abandoned and believed helpless, had found her true vision in blindness, and in the dark spaces where others saw only limitation, she had discovered a light that would guide not just herself, but perhaps in time, others who sought to bridge the divide between worlds too long kept apart. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.